the atheist is stupid. An atheist is dumb. An atheist is stupid. They can do absolutely no good. They have no good in it. They have no good. They can do no good. They bring about destruction and decay. They're bringing destruction and decay in our country today, destroying the fabric and the moral fiber of our community, bringing and setting our country on the course of chaos and destruction. I mean, the atheist is such an ignoramus, it's not even funny. They try the revisionist, the atheist, the radical leftist, constantly trying to say that our country is not a Christian country, that religion cannot be in the public, that there's a separation of church and state, and when it says church, it means, they say, when it says church, they mean religious activity in the public. When everywhere you go in Washington, D.C., you see monuments of quotes from the Founding Fathers, biblical principles etched in the federal buildings and monuments, Ten Commandments, quotes from the Founding Fathers. And the Supreme Court since the 1962 has been ruling in conflict and opposite of all the rulings of the past since the conception of the Founding Fathers' principles. America needs to wake up and smell the coffee, get out there and get involved in politics, law, and restore the founding principles of this country and the Constitution of America. Restore the First Amendment, unhandicap the First Amendment, unhandicap the Second Amendment, and get in there and make some changes and boot out these idiots and these fools, because they're taking us on a course of destruction. And one of these days, our wonderful republic is not going to be here anymore. The atheist, the revisionists of history, and the radical leftists are trying to establish a federal secular humanist denomination, and it is unconstitutional. It is unconstitutional. The secular humanists want to establish a federal denomination of secular humanism. They're giving them special rights. And the Constitution says there needs to be a separation from church and state, a federally established denomination. In this case, it is the secular humanist federal denomination. They even have their covenants and their principles and so forth written down. In many of these liberal institutions, they have their constitution, they have their principles, their vision written down, because they want to establish a federal secular humanist denomination. And the Founding Fathers say there's a wall of separation between church and state, and this is unconstitutional. They are not allowed to establish a federal denomination of secular humanism, and that's exactly what they're doing. They're giving them special rights, and it's time for Americans to wake up and say, hey, the Founding Fathers of this country didn't give you special rights. And they're in violation of the Constitution and contradict the Founding Fathers and the principles and the teachings and their ideas and their philosophy that when they established this great republic which we are under and we stand under. It's time for Americans to wake up. It's time for Christians to wake up and start taking back their God-given rights, inalienable rights endowed by their Creator, as the Declaration of Independence communicates. I'm sick of special rights for the secular humanists. I'm sick of the government trying to establish a federal denomination of secular humanism. Violates the Constitution of law of separation of church and state. And when the Founding Fathers said separation of church and state, they meant a federal denomination, of establishing a federal denomination. They did not mean when they established the separate, when they talked about separation of church and state, in their mind, they weren't saying to keep religious principles out of the public and religious activities out of the public, out of our schools, and so forth. But yet, the secular humanists are going the opposite of the Founding Fathers and what they created and they established. And the Founding Fathers clearly had in mind that this Constitution should be written in stone like the Ten Commandments. It's not a living document, it is written in stone, and the Founding Fathers clearly make those intentions known in their writings. Time for America to wake up and take back their rights endowed by their Creator, their inalienable rights endowed by their Creator, the pursuit of liberty and happiness, and you know the rest of the statements there. Of course, that passage is speaking specifically for the atheist, but it also, in general principles, applies to you and I, because we're all sinful, wicked men, fallen short of the glory of God. Listen to this.
Eustace Joseph Story. The real object of the First Amendment was not to countenance, approve of, much less to advance Mohammedanism, or Judaism, or infidelity, secularism, by prostrating, overcoming, Christianity, but to exclude all rivalry among Christian sects, denominations. Justice Joseph Story, a familiar exposition of the Constitution of the United States, 1840. We are not to attribute this prohibition of the national religious establishment, in the First Amendment, to any indifference to religion in general, and especially to Christianity, which none could hold in more reverence than the framers of the Constitution. At the time of the adoption of the Constitution, the general, if not the universal, sentiment in America was that Christianity ought to receive encouragement from the state so far as was not incompatible with the private rights of conscience and the freedom of religious worship. Republics are created by the virtue, public spirit, and intelligence of the citizens. They fall when the wise are banished from the public councils, because they dare to be honest, and the profligate, immoral, are rewarded, because they flatter the people, in order to betray them. Justice Joseph Story Vidal v. Girard's Executors, 1844.
Listen to this.
Christianity is not to be maliciously and openly reviled and blasphemed against, to the annoyance of believers or the injury of the public. Justice Joseph Story. There is not a truth to be gathered from history more certain, or more momentous, than this, that civil liberty cannot long be separated from religious liberty without danger, and ultimately without destruction to both. Wherever religious liberty exists, it will, first or last, bring in and establish political liberty. Chief Justice John Marshall, in a letter to Jasper Adams, May 9, 1833, the American population is entirely Christian, and with us Christianity and religion are identified. It would be strange indeed, if with such a people, our institutions did not presuppose Christianity, and did not often refer to it, and exhibit relations with it. Thomas Cooley. In his General Principles of Constitutional Law, 1890. It was never intended by the Constitution that the government should be prohibited from recognizing religion, or that religious worship should never be provided for in cases where a proper recognition of divine providence in the working of government might seem to require it. The Christian religion was always recognized in the administration of the common law of the land. The fundamental principles of that religion must continue to be recognized in the same cases and to the same extent as formerly. Judge Gallagher Bayer v. Colmorgan, the Supreme Court of New York, 1958. Much has been written in recent years to a wall of separation between church and state. It has received so much attention that one would almost think at times that it is to be found somewhere in our Constitution. Justice Potter Stewart. I think that the court's task, in this as in all areas of constitutional adjudication, is not responsibly aided by the uncritical invocation of metaphors like the wall of separation, a phrase nowhere to be found in the Constitution. Justice William Rehnquist Wallace v. Jaffrey, 1985. It is impossible to build sound constitutional doctrine upon a mistaken understanding of constitutional history. The Establishment Clause had been expressly freighted with Jefferson's misleading metaphor for nearly 40 years. There is simply no historical foundation for the proposition that the frame was intended to build a wall of separation between church and state. The recent court decisions are in no way based on either the language or intent of the framers. Justice William Rehnquist. But the greatest injury of the wall notion is its mischievous diversion of judges from the actual intentions of the drafters of the Bill of Rights. The wall of separation between church and state is a metaphor based on bad history, a metaphor which has proved useless as a guide to judging. It should be frankly and explicitly abandoned. U.S. Supreme Court, 1811, The People v. Ruggles. Justice James Kent delivered the court's opinion. The defendant was indicted in December 1810, for that he did, on the 2nd day of September 1810, wickedly, maliciously, and blasphemously, utter, and with a loud voice publish, in the presence of hearing of divers good and Christian people, of and concerning the Christian religion, and of and concerning Jesus Christ, the false, scandalous, malicious, wicked and blasphemous words following. Jesus Christ is a bastard, and his mother must be a whore, in contempt of the Christian religion. The defendant was tried and found guilty, and was sentenced by the court to be imprisoned for 3 months, and to pay a fine of $500.